The Rockpile Report.
Buffalo, New York is going to be the epicenter of every stargazing nerd's wet dream.
With Buffalo Bills season ticket holder, Drew Geter.
If there was ever a time to break out Skyline Chili, it's when the Bills are 5-2, right?
The Rockpile Report. The pettiest, hardest drinking Bills podcast.
Everybody to another edition of the Rockpile Report podcast. I'm your host, Bills season ticket holder Drew Geter. That's my producer, Chris Kruger. And guys, I don't know if you know this, but Chris got his 15 seconds of fame this past week.
Hold on there, jackass. I had my 15 seconds of fame years ago when I did a TV pilot. Remember I did a TV pilot?
Yeah.
Remember that?
Tell everybody what that was about.
I did a TV pilot. I found it on Craigslist. It was the first time I've ever went to a like an audition for like TV movies, and I ended up getting it. It was essentially.
Well, hang on. I don't know what I'm more stunned by. First of all, the fact that you took a TV audition off Craigslist, like. I'm not even.
It was safe. I had to go to a church.
I was going to say, I'm less shocked by the joke's still getting made one way or the other. That just almost makes it worse. I was going to say the fact that you got the part. I don't know what's more surprising, that you got it or that they didn't ask you to remove your pants.
No, it's a church. It was supposed to be on something called Family Net. They were trying to do their own original program, never got it, but it's followed like a group of high schoolers that were pretty religious. And, everything that you faced in high school, bullying, dating, all that, and then throw a Bible in there. And that's where you get your answers for dating and bullying. And not just throwing somebody through a coffee shop window like Shawn Michaels to Marty Jannetty inside this giant church that had a coffee shop in it. But yeah, we had a job fair for former Sumitomo employees, and I got interviewed by Spectrum and WIVB, and I didn't make the IVB cut, probably because I made fun of Matt Perino's hair. It's just not as good as mine.
Probably,
but I did compliment Josh Reed's pocket square ability.
This is what I love, guys. Chris doesn't understand. It's like, oh, I got cut from the Channel 4 spot that I did for him. No shit, because the first thing you did was make fun of one of their anchors and they go, oh, so this guy's just an idiot. Like, we saw the hair, we saw the pea coat. He looks well put together. He actually looks like, out of everybody who's here, seems like a guy who's pretty buttoned up. And then the second you opened your mouth, all of that just evaporated and they were like, oh no, this guy's a moron.
We got to gather all of the people that you're going to talk to. You overdo the amount of shoots that you need and interviews that you need and B-roll. That way, you don't show up to the editing room and you have 6 pieces of B-roll and 2 interviews.
I'm just surprised you didn't hit them with guys, I've been in an Alicia Keys commercial before.
Yeah, that I did too. Let's not forget that. I did Alicia Keys.
Oh, what a time to be alive, guys. Chris's mug on TV. You hate to see it. We are here for our Week 14 preview, the Buffalo Bills at the LA Rams. From the top, your time, it is, Chris, America's Game of the Week.
Yeah, 4:25 on Fox.
4:25 kickoff on Fox. And what I love about this is they're going to get the Tom Brady treatment, correct? Because he's the A. First of all, I don't think he's that good. I think Greg Olsen was a better fit for it. I think now that we're deep enough into the season, I can say that, right?
Well, yeah, here, what I'm going to do, you keep talking. I'll pull up what Tom Brady can't do as a broadcaster now that he's a minority owner of the Raiders. Okay.
So, in any event, this will make, I think, the second or third time this season that the Bills have been the game of the week, which is impressive. Like, in a single season that you are one of the best shows involved in the best matchup of the week. I think it's a testament to the fact that even though pundits might not think much of our quarterback and our coach, the people who make the schedule are like, hey, this Josh Allen guy, if you put him on TV, it's art every time, even when they lose.
Read that right there, right here at the top.
Under the guidelines of his minority ownership in the Raiders, Brady cannot be inside another team's facility, attend another team's practices, or take part in crucial pre-production meetings and interviews with coaches, executives, and players.
Exactly. So how do you prepare for a game as a broadcaster if you can't, if Sunday or Saturday night production meetings are going on, you can't be a part of a Josh Allen interview, a Sean McDermott interview, Sean McVay, Matt Stafford, any of the offensive coordinators. You can't talk to Joe Brady, can't talk to Bobby Babich.
Why did they allow this in the first place then?
Yeah.
Like, did Fox know he was going to do this when they gave him all that money?
I think they did.
So they had to know he would suck, and they just assumed we would all just tune in anyway?
He's gotten better as a broadcaster over the season, but it's crucial.
That's like saying you've gotten better as a podcaster.
I have. I've been doing this 10 years.
Yeah, and you as a producer.
Yeah, I'm way better.
You on the microphone, you're way better in the sense that now you actually talk. But that doesn't mean that you're great at it.
No, I enunciate, speak clearly. I'm better at it than you are.
You've been working on your non-regional dialect?
Yes.
Miss Veronica Corningstone. Guys, mute your TVs. Just mute your TVs and just watch the game. 4:25 kickoff at SoFi Stadium in LA. The weather, it's a dome, but it's going to be 67 degrees. I assume you will still, though, see people sitting there in long sleeves in the crowd in the broadcast. I was just watching the Iron Bowl this past week, which, hey, Chris, roll Tide. Roll Tide. Just that's all I'm going to say.
We're both not good.
And yet one of us is a whole lot more not good than the other.
Yeah, you're teetering on the playoff.
They don't deserve the playoffs, let's be honest. A 3-loss team to 2 unranked.
They'll get in.
Alabama must have
Alabama's a brand.
Alabama must have a lot of compromising evidence against a lot of people. That's all I can say. But I was watching the Iron Bowl and I saw people like full pea coats, scarves, winter hats. And then I look at I'm like, wow, this like weather we're getting this weekend must be hitting down south. I look at the thing and it says it's 56 degrees. If I see another adult male wearing a winter hat and it's 56, I'm going to steal it. I'm taking it. Chris, we can't have this.
No.
This is not what our forefathers fought and died crossing the Delaware River for, is for a bunch of people to be sitting around in 56-degree weather with winter hats on. I will not accept this. The line in the game, Bills -4. So we are road favorites. The officiating crew for the game is going to be Craig Rolstad, which I don't know if that's a good thing or not. Craig Rolstad has been involved in some of the uglier games this season. He currently leads he's third in the NFL in penalty yards. He's thrown something crazy, a crazy number of away, like the disparity in away versus home penalties is visible. It's not nearly as balanced as it should be. I think it's around 20. So a whole game's worth of penalties difference, depending on whether you're the home team or not. And ultimately, it just seems like I don't know, like their staff is in the top 5 for penalties that get called and then waved off, which tells me, Chris, that they're flag happy. So I can imagine that this game is going to make everyone want to drink real hard.
I can do that. I'm pretty good at that.
As we can, sir. So with that said, for the 1 o'clock window, according to 506 Sports, what's out there for everybody? You can't has to kind of wait and bide their time.
Locally we have
kickoff.
Locally we have Nance and Romo doing Cleveland at Pittsburgh, and then over on Fox we have Adam Amin and Mark Sanchez, Carolina at Philadelphia. That might be fun if they can put a solo camera on Mark Sanchez, because apparently Mark Sanchez grew his hair out and he looks like was it Crispin from Kindergarten Cop? The bad guy?
Oh, no.
It looks like the bad guy from Kindergarten Cop.
He looks like he's about to drive to the Pacific Northwest and try to kidnap a child from school. Well, some giant guy runs around with a ferret in his coat.
Yes.
God, what a movie. I love that you know that film. Out of all the movies you don't know, you know that one.
How How could you not? Boys have a penis, girls have a vagina.
I just like the movie because I liked the concept of like, he just picks that kid up. Are you eating other people's lunches? Stop it. It's one of the like cleanest, because that's human, right? Like, how many times do you see a kid doing something, and even though it's not your kid, the answer is cut and dry. People are like, well, let's talk to the child and find out what his motivation was. He's 5. You know what his motivation should be? Stop it. If you don't want to hear that again, quit doing the thing.
Who is your daddy and what does he do? My dad hasn't done anything since the crash.
It's the crash. That kid with just the dead eyes. Just what a good, I'm going to have to watch that movie. I'm going to have to watch that movie this week. So we're getting ready to take on the LA Rams. And if you think about the Rams and what they are, just at their core, there's a lot that you want to like, right? They've got a head coach in McVay, who is widely known as, like, I think just this past week, he became the winningest coach in Rams history. He's widely recognized as football fans as being one of the smartest play designers and maybe one of the best offensive minds of at least our generation of adult football fan. Like, you think about what he's been able to accomplish, Chris, every time you talk about, it almost feels like whenever you see a new offensive coordinator / coach hired, either it came from the Sean McVay tree or the Shanahan tree. And also, you hear a lot of like, oh, he's like a McVay in the way that he uses pre-snap motion and all these things. McVay has become the gold standard for that kind of stuff. Just his play design, his pre-snap motion, the way he uses to manipulate defenses. And I think he's earned that. And you want to root for that guy unless you're playing against him, because ultimately his personality is not, I think he's not really in the public eye much. You don't hear from him much. He never has anything bombastic to say. So really there's no reason to dislike him. Then you look at the players on the roster. They used to have Aaron Donald, and Aaron Donald was, whether you liked the Rams or not, there was nothing unlikable about the way he just dominated. And everybody appreciates greatness, I think. Now they have guys like Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, who are just, if you play fantasy football, you know them by name, you know them by face. They're guys who make electric plays. They, like, it gets, in the words of Will Ferrell, it gets the people going, right? And they're also really kind of sneaky physical run blockers, and they're physical wide receivers, which I think if you looked at the way that they put up some of their stats, you wouldn't think they would be. And you want to like them. Then they've got Matt Stafford, right? And outside of Kelly Smiley, now, Chris, if you've forgotten, that's the journalist who fell off the Super Bowl celebration stage, and Matt Stafford was too hammered to help her, so he just stood there and, like, stared. Outside of her, pretty much everybody regards Matt Stafford as just an easy to root for quarterback. He's tough. He's spent a lot of time paying his dues on a lot of really bad Detroit Lions teams and never quit on them. Showed a lot of loyalty to Detroit over the years. And really, truly, I think he was disappointed that he never really could win there. And I think that makes him undeniably likable, right? Like when you see a quarterback who sticks by a shit team,
yeah,
you want to root for that guy, especially if you're a Steelers fan, a Bills fan.
Except for UGA when he was in college.
Yeah, no, he did. Fair. There's all sorts of things on paper where you go, the Rams, I don't know why they're not everybody's favorite. Like, if you're a Bills fan and you have no vitriol towards them, you have no reason to really dislike them, then I don't know why they wouldn't be in the running to be your NFC team to root for. Right? And I will always hate them. I'll always hate them. Forever. Until they put me in the ground. Now that Dan Snyder's gone, there's a new crop of owners who are vying for the title of most punchable in the NFL. Like, and I mean, it's a short list, right? Shad Khan. Shad Khan's team sucks. He makes a lot of unpopular decisions.
His mustache, very punchable.
See, I go the other way on that. I was going to say, like, he's never purposely done anything to hurt anybody else outside of his, like, own fan base. And his mustache is solid. Like, if I see a guy with a mustache like that, even if he's doing something that makes him a jackass, I still want to give him the benefit of the doubt. Shad Khan, great mustache. Jimmy Haslam, obvious boob. Like, imagine being the only owner dumb enough to do the thing. Like, he went out and gave Deshaun Watson at a time when the guy was radioactive. He went out and gave him a fully guaranteed contract. And then the very next year, every owner at the owners' meetings wanted to absolutely, like, they wanted to have him killed like Julius Caesar at the Senate. Because now Lamar Jackson's asking for a fully guaranteed contract. A quarterback who arguably deserves that level of recognition. And basically the NFL had to get together and collude to keep him from doing that. All because of this one owner's stupidity. Steve Biscotti went to that meeting and was like, Jimmy, what the hell are you doing? What is this?
Yeah, Steve Biscotti went, there's a reason we took football away from Cleveland. And we can't have it back because of your dumb ass. And you're just driving up the price of quarterbacks. Tua getting paid all that money. It goes right down the line, and it's going to continue to go down the line for the quarterbacks.
David Tepper, right? Now, he's clearly a moron. If not for the way that he treats restaurant staffs, but maybe because he's owned Carolina since 2018, he somehow managed to not only not broker a deal for like a new practice facility and new like headquarters, but also just burn a ton of bridges with the local governments there. He also forced a suspect quarterback onto his franchise, and in 6 years has had 7 guys wearing the headset as head coach. Tepper, quit getting involved. Those are like offenses where if I was a fan of that team, wouldn't you want that guy's head on a pike?
Mm-hmm.
But for all of the money, right? All my money, I still feel like Stan Kroenke is the biggest piece of garbage in the NFL right now today. He's the first guy in my adult life to screw over a city and an entire fan base, Art Modell style. It just takes the cake for me. I can't get behind it. You watch and you read about the way Kroenke kind of aligned himself with Jerry Jones and basically negotiated with the city of St. Louis in bad faith and unscrupulously screwed over not just the city of St. Louis, also the Raiders, right? Mark Davis, the Chargers, Dean Spanos, both of their fan bases, all in like a bid just to line their own pockets between him and Jerry Jones. The whole thing broke down because Jerry Jones wanted the service contracts the same way they have them here for the Buffalo Bills. Jerry Jones wanted the service contracts for Spanos' new stadium with Mark Davis. And Spanos told him to go to hell. So he did. He went and made a deal with the devil. And next thing you know, Jerry Jones kind of hoodwinks everybody in the NFL and swings the votes to Kroenke because he wants a piece of that pie. To me, it's disgusting. Like, we've made no bones about it over the years since all of this has gone down and during our own stadium situation and kind of the reporting that we've done around that. Like, something like that would kill my love of the NFL, Chris. If the Bills were to leave Buffalo under similar circumstances, where it's clear that they screwed us, they were never intending to be serious or honor any of their contractual obligations here to the city and just kind of found a way to sneak out.
Kind of like the Japanese when Sumitomo Rubber.
Yes, if they pull the Sumitomo Rubber and in the dark of night just decided, you know what, guys, we're washing our hands of this thing. I don't know that I'd be able to watch football the way that I do now. And so to know that a guy like that could and would voluntarily do it to me if given the opportunity, I'll dislike him and his stupid team until he dies. Like, that's it. Stan Kroenke is on the Dan Snyder list for me. Until he's dead, I mean, I wouldn't spit on him if he was on fire. So in that way, I am, as I always am, whenever we play the Rams, rooting for another resounding Buffalo Bills victory in front of that stupid transient city home crowd. Which, Chris, do they even have a home presence?
I don't think so. But if you are going to the game, we do have to remind you, we've done it every time that we've gone out to LA for a game. Please wear your Kevlar vests. We do not need you guys to get stabbed out there in LA. It's a scary place.
Yeah, we always kind of preface it with this. It's like, look, everyone goes, oh, Buffalo Bills fans, and this story about pushing a little girl that now seems like it might be somewhat suspect. And I'm like, guys, you do know that worse than that happens at Raiders games every week. We should probably all
people get stabbed.
So we should probably all be thankful that out there in SoCal, like, we don't have to go there for football games every week. Now, Chris, if you want to do me one favor, as I start talking about the offense, can you just, out of curiosity, Google it for me? What is the average home attendance? But I bet you there's no way to tell. They probably won't know how many LA fans actually go to the game. Because the last time when the Bill, draw an average of 73,000. But I'd love to know the split on how many of those are away fans. Because some games, especially when the Chargers play, it seems like a road game for the home team.
Yeah. Plus that stadium's just really in use for, why don't you come to this Rams-Bills games, and then by halftime, we'll close our business deal and be on our way. They're not even like watching the game.
Or like, hey, it's almost like having courtside seats to a basketball game. It's like, do you actually like basketball? No. Do you know anything about it? No, but I'm here and I'm going to get on TV because I'm famous.
So unfortunately, I had tickets to last night's Sabres game in a suite. There were 4 people in the suite. I don't think they watched a minute of the game. They just were in the little food area of a suite, just chit-chatting the whole time. Like,
that's hilarious.
I wanted to take the 2 people and throw them over the edge down to the 200 section.
So when you start to talk about the game and kind of the nuts and bolts of it, there's a reason that the Bills are favored in this one. And I should say a couple of reasons, but a massive one is just how both teams' offenses stack up against each other in terms of scoring. Like, some of that's going to be expected. If you think about just season-long box scores become difficult, right? Like, if you have a stretch of a couple bad weeks, that might not be who you are as a football team, but it can tip certain statistics. If you say, hey, this team's only ranked 15th in some statistic. Well, now that we're 13 weeks into an NFL season, it is difficult to say, like, well, we had a 3-game stretch there that was so bad that it tipped the aggregate. But, and then you think about the Rams, right, in terms of their offense. They spent first third of the season, they were missing Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. So they were getting by with bit players at the wide receiver positions. And they had some injuries on the offensive line. And that's allowed them to maintain some pretty eye-burning rankings. Like, someone's burning styrofoam inside the house when I look at these things. First quarter scoring, Chris, they rank 30th in the NFL. Second quarter scoring, they rank 21st. They have the 26th ranked rushing offense. And 9 of their 12 games this season, they have 0 first quarter points. With that said, they're getting healthy. And the stats that they're putting up now, probably look worse than their actual performance on the field. That's why it's hard to reconcile them being 6-6. They look like a team that for stretches of games knows what they're doing, and yet it's not translating to the scoreboard. It's like, Chris, they're 6th in the NFL in first downs per play. So they're getting first downs and they're moving the football, and yet it's not relating to the scoreboard. It's not ending up there. There's no points being generated. And for what it's worth, Buffalo's 4th in terms of first downs per play. But one of the crazy things is if you just take a look at their last 5 games, now that they've quote unquote gotten healthy, they're averaging 6 first half points per game, which if you're a fan of this football team is alarming, because isn't that supposed to be like, you have those wide receivers, you have this coach who has this pedigree, you have all the nice things, all the likable things. Why the hell aren't you scoring? I feel like if I was a fan, that would be what I was screaming at the TV every single weekend. I mean,
yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't get to watch much of the Rams. I just know, all I know is that Puka had some injuries this year. hampered him. He's hampered him all year. And then Cooper Kupp, he's just been injured most of the last two seasons. When was his big breakout year? Was that 3 years ago?
Yeah.
He's just been injured, and the Rams have been meh. They've been, as the children say, mid.
Mid. So one of the things that I find interesting is when you start to dig into some of the numbers too, and you start to look for drivers of this, because you're like, I don't understand. Well, one of it's that they run the timing-based offense, right? And it just wasn't clicking. And I think a lot of that is the amount of time that Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp have missed. And it's just being disrupted. And I don't know if some of that's because they're not using as much pre-snap motion. That's a thing that I've read every time I've tried to look at this matchup. And I've asked, or Google the question, what's gone wrong in LA this year? And one of the things that comes up is the concept that they're not utilizing as much pre-snap motion, but some of that has to do with the fact that they've had to bring in new faces. Nacua is a second-year player, and Cooper Kupp's a long-time veteran, but they don't have a lot of depth at tight end, and they don't have really any – they don't have any headlining production coming from that position. Their offensive line has some new faces who have had up and down performances, and guys like Steve Avila, who's just coming back to health. It can throw off, Chris. This is what the Dolphins do. They have a timing-based offense, and those aspects of their game, the Bills have been really good at disrupting over the years. And you've watched the year over year. You watch the Dolphins perform really well right up until they play the Buffalo Bills. And because of the things we can do both pre and post snap to disrupt the timing that you think that you're going to have of hey, I'm just going to throw to a spot and let my guy go get it. And then just before you snap the ball, the Bills cycle their safeties and you go, oh shit. All right, well, now I'm already switching to my second read because I don't want to risk throwing into what I think is going to be an occupied window. You're seeing that, and Cooper Kupp actually admitted it last week. There was a touchdown pass that he could have had, and the ball seemed like it was overthrown or maybe thrown to the wrong spot. And then in the postgame, he was asked about it, and Cooper Kupp admitted that, well, we thought we knew where the safety was going to be. And then based on the route combinations and where he was going to have to drop inside to cover, we didn't think he'd be able to drop back that deep. Well, it turns out the guy busted his own coverage and ended up accidentally being where the Rams didn't expect him to be. And because of that, Stafford had to just airmail a ball and just hope that it was only where his guy could get it. And it ended up being an incomplete pass that probably otherwise would have been a touchdown. I have a feeling that, Chris, the Bills don't have the Saints defense. We do a lot of those things more intentionally.
Yeah.
It doesn't just happen by kismet. And so with that in mind, I think that they're going to have to contend with that. Also, their protection this year has not been what it was in the year where they were, winning, going to the Super Bowl in the last couple of years when they've been contending, making the playoffs. They haven't really been able to, I don't know how else to say this. They harass the passer, right? They get everybody, the Saints harassed the passer last week, leading to Sean McVay's, what was it? It was his second first half shutout of his entire career, or second one. The first one being the Super Bowl that he lost to Bill Belichick. This isn't Bill Belichick's defense that he's playing. It's the New Orleans Saints who stink on ice. They've had a really hard time protecting him. And as soon as those pressures, there's an uptick in them, it throws a lot of wrenches into their game plan. And a part of that has been inconsistent run utilization, which helps fuel that dynamic. Now, he's not Mike McDaniel in this regard. But it's worth noting that while getting shut out in the first half last week, they only ran the ball 11 times. Even though they have Kyren Williams, who everybody who plays fantasy football knows this guy is a productive running back, especially when you see what got him going last year down the stretch was that they committed to this duo run approach. And when you started allowing the running back to see the open field and set up his cuts ahead of time against guys at the second level, he can make a lot of plays for you. That hasn't appeared much this year. Now, maybe some of it was the early injuries on the offensive line, some of the shuffling that had to take place here. But it's crazy. Chris, like if I told you you're running the ball 6 yards a carry,
you would stay committed to that.
You would commit to that.
Unless you're Mike McDaniel. Then you get away from it.
So what ends up happening in the first half of that Saints game, as they're getting shut out, he's averaging 6 yards per carry, but they threw the ball 12 times. Like almost like what? So what is that? Like 52, 53%? And it led to no points and 2 sacks that ultimately ended drives. And then, right, like they go into the locker room and allegedly, based on what the reporting that I've read, McVay went to his offensive line and his quarterback and just said, guys, here's the mandate. We are going to pound the rock and we're going to keep this pass rush of theirs at bay and grind the second half out because their offense stinks and we're going to beat them. The end result, they win the game. Williams has over 100 yards rushing for the day. I think he finished with 104. It was just his second 100-yard rushing game of the season, which kind of underscores the idea that he's capable of these things. They just don't give him the football enough for him to make a difference. He ends up averaging 6.9 yards on his 15 carries. And then I think Blake Corum chipped in like another 40 or something as a rookie. If you know that you're capable of running for 140 yards a game, why wouldn't you be feeding that? You know, it almost feels like they're having the opposite problem of the Buffalo Bills. You know, the Buffalo Bills were trying to find balance, and instead we were just pass heavy. And the run wasn't working, but we kept trying to shoehorn it in. Their problem is that the pass isn't working. And when the pass doesn't work, they're not content to just steer into the run unless you absolutely force them to. Now, I don't know what would happen if they ever, for once, just committed to it. You know, maybe you'd see them break this trend of terrible first half starts in games. So far, McVay has not shown a proclivity to do that. And so in that way, it leaves them really vulnerable. And it's a testament to their defense, right? That they haven't been playing from farther behind and that no one has really been able to put them into holes that they can't climb out of. You know, I'm looking back at the last couple of weeks and they've basically traded wins and losses. You know, they go to overtime with the Seahawks. You know, the Dolphins, they lose to the Dolphins at home. Then they win, but it's like a narrow one over the Patriots. And you start looking at these things and you say to yourself, okay, you didn't score in the first half. You know, the Rams were down 7-13 to the Eagles, who eventually went on to beat them by 17 points in the second half. But you made it to halftime with a close game. Here, the Rams, it was a 14-10 game against the New England Patriots, but they kept it close. You know, they got shut out in the first half against the Saints, but their defense was able to keep the Saints to 6 points, which is ultimately why they're able to rally and come back and win the game in the second half. So it's one of these things where they've spent most of the season playing with fire. And it realistically is. You know, Chris, you always hear that trope of like, oh, well, this team is too talented to be this bad. Maybe early on in a season. You know, if you're talking about the first handful of weeks of an NFL season, you're looking at a team like the Ravens, who's 2-0, and they're going to go to the Cowboys and go. You say to yourself, okay, the Ravens are too talented of a team to be this bad. I don't think that's the case with the Rams this year. I think they are who they are both by design and both by a lack of talent. The design piece of this is that I think they thought their pass game would return to normal, and I think they're finding out that maybe those wide receivers, even coming back from their injuries, maybe still aren't as healthy as you'd like them to be. And maybe at the same time, they're not as on the same page as Matt Stafford as they used to be. And maybe the protection. I mean, hell, you look at the guys who were there on the offensive line when they last won the Super Bowl. We have one of their starting offensive linemen on our roster now. That's how far departed they are from this. And so in this way, their offense for the last month and change has been playing with fire in regards to these painfully slow starts. And it's really kind of a boon to it's a boon to them that their defense has kept them in it. But their defense is also somewhat imperfect, and that's why I say that this team at this point is every bit of a 6-6 football team. Because, I want to start this with something that happened recently this week. On Tuesday, the Rams shocked everybody. I know this because myself and Ravens film study host Ken McCusick, we were talking about this dynamic of a cornerback by the name of Emmanuel Forbes, who was cut by or at least was rumored to be traded or released, and then ultimately released by the Washington Commanders. And so all of the conjecture is that there was multiple football teams in the running to sign him after he hit waivers, which makes perfect sense because when you think about his contract situation, this is a cornerback who was drafted in the first round, who has been benched for large portions of his career so far through 2 years. Next year, you've already burned through the cheap years, Chris. For his next 2 seasons, he costs at least $2.85 million guaranteed against your salary cap. For a guy who you don't even know if he can get on the field, that's a lot of money.
What, are the Rams in the same position as the Saints? Or are they Saints 2.0 when it comes to their cap?
Well, let's talk about it. So here's the thing. We were both thinking, hey, it might make sense for a team like the Ravens, maybe a team like the Bills, maybe a team with hey, we want to stay young and cheap at cornerback. Here's an option to sign this guy to a futures deal, let him be on the practice squad for a while, and then you'll have him next year, and you can give him a shot at something. And instead, the Rams decided to claim him off waivers and eat his contract. So they're not only paying him his guaranteed money this season, but they're also paying his full cap hits for the next 2 years, which means now you can't cut him because he's expensive. And you don't get dead cap relief for this. And it's a real head scratcher. We both assumed that he would just sign somewhere based on how bad he's been. But the Rams wanted that money. They were willing to put themselves on the hook for it. On its face, if you're only looking at our game in a vacuum here, it doesn't seem relevant to the conversation, right? It just seems like a roster move made by another GM that has no bearing on Bills, Rams. But it is. Because if you think about what the Rams are this year, they're a team that signed cornerback Trey White after the Bills released him. They went out and spent $10 million to sign Trey White. Which at the time, if a team that he's been a former All-Pro for says, nah, we're done. The salary, I think, Chris, what was he going to make? If you can give that a goog.
I'll pull up his Spotrac.
Pull up his Spotrac. I want to see what he would have cost the Bills to keep. They gave him a $10 million deal. And it just went disastrously. He at one point was leading the NFL in touchdowns allowed for a cornerback. He was just started to be benched and made inactive for games, even though he was healthy. He just never meshed with what it is their scheme was going to be and what they needed from a cornerback. And so they jettisoned him from the roster. They trade him away to the Ravens. This is also a team that lost 3 defensive backs due to injury in training camp. Now, one of them is returned. One of them was lost for the season. Another one, I think, is back in the lineup now. But it got so bad that down the stretch, they were like, we need a veteran presence. So they bring in this guy, Ahkello Witherspoon, who's been around. He's been an NFL veteran, and he's kind of a Band-Aid. Also, Chris, if you're taking guys off the street and putting them in your active roster, we remember doing that with our linebacker position last year.
Oh, yeah.
If you're doing that, it probably means things aren't good. Okay. They got Ahkello Witherspoon got worked over a little bit by New England. He got worked in the red zone. And it's you can't have that. This is New England. This is shitty New England offense with a rookie quarterback. You can't allow yourself to have that happen to you. Not if you're a good one. This is a secondary that can absolutely get picked on. And they make a lot of egregious, they cause a lot of egregious penalties. And when I say egregious, those aren't my words. Those are the words of head coach Sean McVay, who said that they really, he said we have some miscommunication. The way he characterized the discord that's going on in their secondary right now is that it's a byproduct of miscommunication and egregious penalties. Chris, that sounds an awful lot, right? Like an awful lot like something the Buffalo Bills could exploit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like in terms of passing touchdowns, they're 22nd in the NFL. That's pretty bad for a team that's trying to make the playoffs. You're not even in the top half of the league in terms of stopping the other team from getting into your end zone through the air. That's also a problem when you take a look around at what's happening in front of them. Now, I don't want to shit all over these guys because their defense isn't awful. Their safeties are fine. Cameron Kitchens is actually Kitchens. Everyone says Kitchens, but he has an N in his last name, so it looks like Kinchens, and I hate that. Because then it makes me feel, it's like when people say my last name and they want to put an R in there so badly.
Yeah.
Do you know how many like I worked for a company once and I showed up and they had like a nameplate and like a placard made for me. Greer. I looked at it. I was like, what the hell is that? They were like, oh, that's your name. Literally everything down to my paperwork and human resources, they had put an R in my name for no reason.
My favorite is Geyer. It's not how you do it. Or like when you do, because I'm big time now, and you do a interview with a TV outlet, they will put the mic in your face like this, and they will go, state your name, spell it. So that's what I did for Spectrum. Still misspelled my last name.
Chris, it's just because they don't care.
I mean, well, the guy, if you go read that article and watch the video, the guy that's doing the voiceover, he wasn't there. They just had a camera guy.
That's awesome.
And he interviewed me.
I've been a part of that before. And I think that it wouldn't be bad, like, if you could point at their secondary and say, like, okay, here's what we're dealing with this year. Here are the players and here's the different skill sets that we have at our disposal. And you said, well, here's the one guy who you might be able to pick on. Here's a guy who makes a lot of mistakes. Or here's a guy who might be, like, if you're talking about like, Chris, I'm just trying to think of a recent opponent the Bills had, where there's a cornerback who you just kind of look at and you go, oh, that's a liability. Like, that's going to be a problem for them. I like to think of, like, when I hear there's a guy named Storm Duck who's starting for the Miami Dolphins. Like, to me, I say, okay, that's pretty good. I kind of like that. You know, their starter, Darius Williams, he's okay. He's not great. You know, you go on down the list, Kobe Durant, not special, nothing crazy. And then you go down and you start taking a look at, like, oh, Cameron Curl, like, you're a decent safety, but you're not special. You attack the ball well. Like, you've given up the most touchdowns on the team, though. There isn't a singular weak link. It's just a bunch of average defensive players. There's a whole bunch of guys, in fact, who can just get got. I mean, like, you go back to the loss that they had against Miami, every single defensive back on the roster gave up at least one pass. And then what's disappointing is 75% or more of their targets were given up by 8 different defenders on the team. There are a lot of places where the Buffalo Bills are going to be able to find gaps to operate in terms of the way they want to operate a short passing game. I'd almost argue, Chris, especially if we see the return of Keon Coleman, this is a game you might be able to get in some more of the deep passing attack that just because of the way, you know, the way the Kansas City game after we hit them a couple times with Amari Cooper, the way the snow kind of prevented things against San Francisco. I think this is a game where you could look to stretch the field against this team a little bit. They also, at the second level, and I think what hurts them from a safety perspective, their safeties have a hard time driving on the ball inside the box. You know, it's something Bills safeties will do and have done in every Sean McDermott system since he's arrived here in Buffalo. The problem they have is that their linebackers are painfully average, you know, especially this guy Hesh, who they give up a lot of yards after the catch. And a lot of it's just, Chris, lack of awareness. You know, Matt Milano is one of his specialties is just knowing where to be. Like, he's not a huge guy. It's not like he's Tremaine Edmonds who just occupies a ton of airspace. He just knows where to be. He has a feel for where you as a quarterback in coverage want to go, especially in a zone. And his athleticism allows him to get to spots faster than most linebackers. The Rams don't have anything like that. They've got pretty average linebacking talent. And so what happens is the safeties get tasked with saying, hey, I know that I probably should help keep the cover on this too high safety look. But also I kind of have to keep an eye on my linebackers, because if they get gashed and let a guy come running downhill at me, or let's say they misplay, let's say it's not play action. Let's say it's, hey, this is a running play. Those linebackers are capable of getting beaten to a spot by a running back. And it becomes a problem. You know, you want to talk about where this thing kind of, where they live and die here on defense. The thing that might be their saving grace is their defensive line. And it's kind of funny how they built it, right? Because they were the team that's known for the whole Les Snead, fuck them picks thing on a coffee cup. They didn't care. They burned all of their draft capital in the pursuit of titles. And they got one, to their credit. And then they've paid the price a little bit since then, because there was a window there where it was very difficult for them to add talent via the draft. But so it's fine. I guess it's kind of ironic that the best part of their defense right now is this super young defensive line that they've cobbled together using nothing but second and third round picks. You know, Jared Verse is their best pass rusher. Braden Fisk is this big, just bull of a rusher on the other side. Their interior defensive line is solid versus the run and can generate a little bit of pass rush. Like, they get between the four of their starters on the defensive line, their pass rush gets in your ass. And Verse is an interesting player because he, you know how like we talk about Groot has to win with power?
Yes.
Greg Rousseau wins a lot of his with power, and just whether it's a stunt or how it's the coordinator setting him up for success. Verse can win on his own with just a combination of power and speed. And guys who are both powerful and a little bendy are scary. Because even if you have great tackle play like the Buffalo Bills do, it does give you cause for concern. And so when you see the pressure numbers from their last few games, it's obvious like this is the thing that's going, like this is the straw that stirs the drink for this entire defense. The problem is that they can also be had a little bit in the run game. So on defense, you look at some of the performances they've had, and everyone can point to the Eagles and go, well, they gave up 200. It's like, okay, Saquon Barkley is Saquon Barkley. He's in the running for MVP for a reason. And he had a career night against the Rams. Then you talk about the New Orleans Saints and you say, well, Alvin Kamara is really good, but their offensive line has rookies on it. They're playing backups. Like, it seems concerning that you're able to generate 143 yards rushing against that defense. And then you go back and you look, you're like, oh, the Patriots got a $125 off on them. And you go back down the stretch and you just look at all season long. Teams have been churning out 120, 130 yard rushing games against this front seven. And some of that's not the defensive line's fault, because honestly, you need more from your linebackers, but unfortunately, they're just average. And so if the defensive line can't control the line of scrimmage completely, most teams that can commit to running the football stay in football games with them. And in some cases, just like in the case of the Eagles, end up blowing them out completely. I mean, that's how the Dolphins won, was a commitment to using the running backs. The Patriots kept them down to the wire by running the football. The Saints kept it a game by running the football. Like, I mean, the Saints only threw for 184 passing yards. And they were like, with a minute left, it took a fourth quarter, fourth down stand to keep the Saints out of the end zone and ice that game, Chris. This team is playing with fire every single time they play the football field. And the one thing that they've proven that they can't do, all right, like their secondary can put up some phenomenal performances sometimes. They're still very, I would call them leaky at times. But if you can get them in the run game, you're guaranteed that this game will go 4 quarters. And if you can score fast enough, do what all these other teams weren't doing, and score fast enough in the first half, maybe you can render that a moot point. And that brings me to tonight's keys to victory.
Wow, that's a lot of keys.
Bigger the keychain, more powerful the man.
I think one of the biggest things that the Bills are going to have to do in this game is focus on the outside run with James Cook. And I say this because when I look over some of the statistics from some of their recent games where they really did struggle to contain the run, some of the biggest plays of the day, and also just, Alvin Kamara had yardage all over the line of scrimmage. But it's notable that he was putting up 7.3 yards per attempt when running off right tackle because their weak side linebacker isn't very good. And those safeties, if you're a team that's showing like, hey, I've got a Marvez Valdez-Scantling, I'll throw the ball down the field. Hey, I've got an Amari Cooper. I've got a Keon Coleman. I will throw down the sideline. And you encourage their safeties not to come down into the box. Those linebackers have a hell of a time wrangling the running game. And so where you end up is a place, Chris, where we absolutely could steer into this. Like, look at the night James Cook had against the 49ers. The 49ers have better linebacker play. I don't know about defensive line play, but definitely better linebacker play than what we're going to see from the Rams this weekend. I think if you can get to the edges of the team and get James Cook, because do you think this is a crazy thing if I say it out loud? Right now, James Cook is a better running back than Alvin Kamara.
I will agree with that. Plus, we have
or at least he's playing better football.
We have more depth at that position. Like all season, there have been games where, we've used James Cook and then we can at some point turn to Ray Davis or maybe Ty Johnson will step up. We have bodies behind James Cook that'll produce. And I think that's what has separated our run game throughout most of the season is 100%. The amount of depth.
Can you do me a favor? Pull up the game logs for Alvin Kamara. I'm going to look at the ones for James Cook because I just want to see something. So, and I think you just touched on something important for this game. It's going to take some variance. You can't just have a speed guy. Sometimes it's going to take running with power. Sometimes it's going to take a guy who can catch out of the backfield. Or a guy, God forbid, you get into third and long. You're going to need a running back that can pass protect because of the quality of that defensive line. It's awesome knowing how well our running back stable and our offensive line match up against these guys. You have tackles who I think technique-wise, Baldinger every week has another breakdown of just how great of a job Deion Dawkins is doing. This move that Dawkins calls the ice pick. Have you seen it?
No.
Defensive linemen kind of come in with their hands like, hey, I'm going to try to get the edge. And Dawkins just chops the arms out from underneath him. Like judo chop, 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 chop. It's almost like, do you remember GoldenEye? And then you play Slappers Only.
Oh, yeah.
He just chops the hell out of these guys. And what it does is it throws off their balance and their timing in terms of how they're trying to lean or how they're trying to contort to catch an edge either around him or, I'm thinking about setting up a spin move past you. Yeah, chop. As you're trying to make your initial step and now you're off balance. Like that's what. And so knowing what a technician he's become at this stage of his career, it's a huge boon to his pass protection skills. So when he goes up against Jared Verse, I'd like to think Deion Dawkins gets the better of him for most of the day. On the other side of the line, Braden Fisk, big, strong, power rusher. Well, I think it almost helps that we have a big, strong brick shithouse of a right tackle of our own, right?
Oh, yeah.
I like this matchup. I think that we match up really well with them in terms of our size, athleticism, and technical ability. But what also helps is that you're going to be able to on third and long, because we will have them. You're going to be able to put Ty Johnson back there, who understands, like in that Chiefs game, he was the only running back to see third down snaps. Why? Because they knew that, one, he knows how to make himself available for Josh as a receiver. He knows what to do when the ball's in his hands. And three, he has an understanding of how to chip in and pass protection back there. If he sees a tackle, or let's say he sees one of the interior guys losing their battle, he already understands how to set himself up to give Josh the extra half a second he might need to either escape or deliver a pass downfield. I think and at the same time, the speed of James Cook being on the field is going to force the defense to play a certain type of defense. Their linebackers' heads are going to have to be more on a swivel, especially looking at the sidelines and looking at the hashes. And then Ray Davis. If we find that the interior offensive line is able to open some holes and get some things open on the wing, this could be another game where you see Ray Davis get in there for maybe 10 carries. And out of those, maybe he can churn out 50, 60 yards. All it takes, as the Miami game showed, Ray Davis isn't the fastest running back in the world, but all it takes is one broken tackle and you can't catch him. So I'm really excited about that part of our matchup, and it's one we have to win. It's our offensive tackles and our running backs against that defensive line. I also think, Chris, I'm not going to overcomplicate this. Score early. I don't care if it's field goals. You're in a dome. Tyler Bass should be able to have a day here. And I think it's interesting to note that the kicker for the Rams, not having a great year. Chris, you want to go ahead and give that a goog?
Who's the kicker?
Oh, my God. What's his stupid name? Because I remember that.
It's not Matt Gay.
Rams fans were screaming. I remember because I was listening to it. It was when I was talking about having to apologize, right?
Ethan Evans, Joshua Carty.
Mm-hmm. It's a Carty party, baby. Not having a great season. Like, when you take a look at his misses, Chris, he's got what? Two field goals attempted, 2 misses against the Rams from inside 40. I mean, against the Dolphins.
Yeah, it's not good.
No. And guys, if you don't believe me, go to Pro Football Reference and just look at Josh Carty. And look at this. So he's done this twice against San Francisco in a game that they won by a field goal. He missed both of his field goal attempts inside of 40.
Against the Niners?
Yeah. He's been terrible.
No, it's 2 for 2. 100%.
Oh, no, there we go. That's what I'm looking for.
100%. 80 against Chicago, he had misses.
Against Chicago, against Miami, he had misses. And what I think is tough is his PATs, I believe, are also low. He's missed a couple of those. Ultimately, we have a better kicker. We have a better quarterback based on what they are at this point in your career. I think that this is the game where you got to do the thing that every team they've played for the last 5 weeks has allowed the Rams to do, which is use your defense and hang around while our offense flounders. I think this is a game you got to score 10 in the first quarter. You got to hit them fast. So this puts pressure on Joe Brady, right? Because again, if 2 idiots sitting around drinking beer on a Wednesday night can come up with the idea like, hey, these are the numbers. This is where everybody else fucks up and lets them hang around. I have to come out with a well-scripted first drive. So you're doing a ton of film study because you're thinking to yourself, on that first drive, if I really, really want to take this game and run away with it, I have to score right then and there.
Do you think that there's going to be any kind of hangover from winning the division on Sunday Night Football and then having to travel all the way west? I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of, I don't know, kind of how the Sabres played last night to start the game. Very sloppy. I would not be surprised if they have a division hangover.
I would like to say that it wouldn't, right? Because of the Buffalo Bills. There's Sean McDermott, as we kind of talked about in this week's live show. Sean McDermott, I've only seen him get choked up once during that whole, like, we did it, man. And his voice cracked. Now you look at him and look at there wasn't a wet eye in that room. Everyone was like, cool. We did it. Fuck the haters. Also, we're not done. We got shit to do.
Well, I was talking to Reed at his event for the veterans before the Chiefs game. And I was like, how are you going to keep your focus? If you beat the Chiefs and then you come into the Niner game, you're going to come into that game with the ability to beat the Niners and clinch the division at the same time. Like, you're like, you guys are going to be okay, right? Like, you're not going to let that go to your head and slide. And he just patted me on the back and was like, we got it. I mean, it's not, I mean, I don't often ask Reed about football questions, but he was like, yeah, don't worry. Don't worry. We know how to stay motivated.
Yeah.
So they got their thing.
And Chris, think about what they've been motivated to accomplish so far this season. Think about the odds, everyone doubting them all offseason long for reasons that on their face seemed reasonable. Imagine what you would have to do to focus to overcome those problems. Like everybody who pointed out, this is going to be this has the potential to be a problem for the Bills. This thing is a deficiency of the Bills roster. Here's a problem. Here's a potential problem. Here's a potential problem. All of these things had merit. Now, what made people horses' asses were the ones who decided to make it speak emphatically on the topic, right? Like even now, Richard Sherman is still pounding the table saying Josh Allen's not MVP caliber. And I go, buddy, I don't know what else to tell you. He's broken how many records? He holds how many records? He's the only reason our team is piling wins. Like, Chris, what's this team with Mitch Trubisky?
You can only run the ball.
So I guess it's just that thing of they could have let the distractions get to them. And while this will be kind of the litmus test of do they really have the focus to just kind of, because they're not out of the woods, right? That game against the Lions, God willing, and the creek don't rise, could be a Super Bowl preview. Could be.
What's our friend Doug Roloski gonna do?
I'd love nothing more than to get him in here so we could pick his brain about it. But with that in mind, I don't doubt that if they've overcome all of this stuff to get here, Week 14 AFC East champions already, the first team to really button it up, right? Like, hey, no matter what happens, I'm in. I'm good. I'm the first division winner. I just think that you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. I like the line of 4. I think the Bills win by a field goal because that's what the Rams have been doing. They've been dragging everybody into the deep water and hanging around and hanging around. I think, Chris, and do you agree with me? I think Joe Brady and Josh and these guys have the tools and they have the talent to put points up. I mean, look at how many 30-point games they've scored this season.
Yes, a lot.
Against a mediocre defense, I expect them to be able to come out and do the thing no one has been able to do for a month and a half and just run away with the game early. Just put it on them. Force them away from the run because that's the other key to victory. Get that lead quickly so that you don't have to worry about what a successful rushing attack that can average 6 yards a carry looks like. You don't have to see it if you can get up by 10 points. I think that it's that thing of your best defense is a good offense. Go out there and put the pressure on them. If you do that early, you will win this football game. Done. Bargained and done. Chris, I love getting together and talking about this. Nothing will make me happier to see just the camera cutting to a disgruntled Stan Kroenke up there in his fucking box.
Maybe he'll give the finger to us.
Like Bud Adams?
Yes.
Dude, guys, if there's anybody out there who's sitting anywhere near Stan Kroenke's box, please moon him. Please moon him so I can see his reaction on television, because if we can ever draw the Bud Adams response out of this guy, it'll be the greatest thing. It'll be one of the greatest achievements of my life. Please. I will live vicariously through you forever if you can accomplish this for me. Chris, this has been fun, and I'm excited for this one because you stack one more, you get to 11. Again, ahead of what could be a Super Bowl preview game. Like this, they need, like, you can't sleep on this, right? Because all of these games matter. Now you're just eyeing the Chiefs, waiting for that inevitable stumble. You're still, Alan said it, we're still chasing something. He's like, I'm not worried because I still got something to chase. You mean to tell me that after they're up by 14, they're not going to be scoreboard watching going, how'd that game end? How's that Chiefs game going? Guys, I can't wait to see it. But for tonight, we're going to get the hell out of here. I'm Drew Gear. That's Chris Kruger. This has been your Rock Pile Report.